Us with another opportunity to assemble and worship Him. I pray that what I say will be pleasing in His sight, and that each of us will benefit from our time together this morning. I don't think we have to talk long or think very hard about seeing division in our world around us, especially from a religious standpoint, but we are divided on basically every topic under the sun in our country today. And there are things, we call ourselves the United States, and we say that we're one nation, but we're really not. We're very, very divided over everything. I just saw a thing, and the name would make you think they would already know, but the WNBA is having meetings here coming up to define and decide what a woman is. The W in the WNBA stands for women. And they're having to now figure out and define what makes a woman. So we're divided over the very basic of genetics, over DNA and chromosomes. When I was in school, we were taught that that was the building blocks of everything. If we can't agree upon that, we are divided about everything. Well, if we take that and we bring that into the religious world, and we've heard things like, well, it doesn't matter where you go to church or what you believe, as long as you believe and go somewhere. Have we heard statements like that? Or you believe your way and I'll believe mine, but we'll all end up in the same place together in the end. We'll all be in heaven together. We've probably all heard things like that. And others would say, well, the Bible is so mysterious. It's so complex. There's no way that we can possibly all understand it as one. We have to have our own interpretation of how the scriptures are written and what they mean. Is that being united together? Much like us as a country, are we united on what defines a man and a woman? Are we united on, I mean, the list could go out the door as to what divides us from the color of the sky on down. And the same with religious division. Are we united when we have differences in the most basic of doctrine? We're not united at all. And Jesus prayed for that in John chapter 17 in the Lord's Prayer. In John chapter 17 and beginning in verse 20, if we're divided and separate from one another in even just the most basic of beliefs, are we one? That would be the question that I would want to pose for us today. Are we united? If we have these religious beliefs, when we believe and practice one thing, and then some church that meets within 10 minutes from our building or less, probably more like 10 seconds in some instance, and they practice another, are we united with them? What would unite us if we have division between us? Well, we can't be one with them. But that's what Jesus prayed for all of his disciples. In John chapter 17 and beginning in verse 20, he said, I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And the glory which you gave me, I have given them, that they may be one just as we are one. I in them and you in me, that they may be perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me, and have loved them as you have loved me. Now, when we think about being one, and I mentioned the church being divided. If we drive, just go out to Millville Avenue and head west, and you think of how many different churches we pass as we go out that road. I mean, that little strip mall there across from what used to be Marsh, now Ace Hardway. That was called something like Churchway Road or something like that. I forget what it, but it had something to do with churches because of all the different churches that are in that stretch of highway as you go out through there. And are we united with all of those churches? And sadly, even if we look at churches that bear the same name as Church of Christ, but have differences in foundational beliefs that are conflicting with each other, are we united with them? Is that what Jesus was praying for? How can we be united if we have division between our beliefs? But he prays here that, number one, they're all going to be united, but as the world sees them and looks at them, they're going to see that united belief between all of them, and that's going to cause the world to look towards God because they're going to know that we're united in Him. In what physical application would this mindset make sense? What physical application could we apply this? Well, if you do one thing and I do something different, we're going to get the same result. When could we make that hold true in this physical world? If you practice this thing over here, if you're going to fix your car like this, and I'm going to fix my car like that, they'll both end up running the same way. But that's probably not going to work in many instances that I can think of. One's going to be, or maybe both of them won't be running. One might be running, but both of them won't be. I had my Jeep last, or 2 years ago, I think it was. It sat in the garage for a long time with the hood up because I kept working. Doug finally came over and helped get it running. But there was only one way that it was going to get fixed. My way was not the right way because I didn't know what I was doing. From a religious standpoint, if I don't know what I'm doing, it's not going to go the right way, is it? It doesn't make sense physically to think that we can be divided on something and end up in the same place. Well, it doesn't work from a religious standpoint either. How do we justify these divisions? If we look over in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and beginning in verse 10, again, Paul is saying to be united together. If we can't all understand the Bible in the same way, and we don't interpret the scriptures in the same way, how does Paul expect us to speak the same thing? 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and beginning in verse 10, now I plead with you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment, for it has been declared to me concerning you, my brethren, by those of Chloe's household, that there are contentions among you. Now I say this, that each of you says, I am of Paul, or I am of Apollos, or I am of Cephas, or I am of Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you, or were you baptized in the name of Paul? If we're not in agreement, and we're not speaking the same thing, are we united? Paul, wouldn't he be united by the inspiration of God with the other writers of the New Testament? And he's saying you can all speak the same thing by the same understanding of the Scripture. As Peter said, some of the things that Paul wrote was hard to understand, but it's not impossible. The Scriptures aren't open to private interpretation. How can we all interpret it the same way? Well, when I think of verse 10, and he talks about being joined together and no divisions, I think in a physical standpoint of maybe a window or a door hinge. And if you've ever installed one, you can tell if it's not perfectly level and everything is not perfectly right, that door or that window is not going to open and close right, if at all. And I mean, it doesn't take much. We're talking just a fraction of an inch being off, because I have several in my house that way that some expert installed. He may be the one standing up here in front of you, but guess what? They don't close right because they're just a fraction off. It's not fitly joined together, is it? Just try opening and closing it right when it's not perfectly joined together. Try aligning ourselves spiritually with someone that we're not in complete agreement with. We can't do it. If we're willing to take an honest look at what Jesus and Paul and Peter, it says we learn that unity is a very powerful witness to the world because they can see that something greater than ourselves is aligning us. How does that happen? Well, we all agree to the same standard. And what's funny, if you travel and you go to any true congregation that's practicing the truth from the New Testament and you walk in, they all feel exactly the same. They're all the same. And you leave and you're uplifted because here's another group of brethren and sisters that are meeting and are professing to be Christians and they're on the truth. It's so helpful and beneficial. We have no ruling council or headquarters on the earth to determine what we believe and practice. Where do we find our authority? Well, from the scriptures. But even among, sadly, churches professing to be the Church of Christ, we're finding more and more division coming in there. Some of the new things, and I don't know why these go in cycles, but some of the new things I'm reading many are now starting to dispute the Sabbath day. And some are saying it's Sunday, and some are saying it's Saturday, and some are now trying to divide us on which day we're supposed to do these things. And then there's a great division arising about how we partake in the Lord's Supper. And of course, there's problems with baptism on how that's to be done. Are we following the patterns, these two passages that we've looked at so far from John 17 and 1 Corinthians 1? If we're divided about those things and one group is practicing one and one's practicing another, are we fitly joined together? No, we're nowhere near following the scriptures. We're not joined together. And the second thing we see is that when there are divisions, it's often the mark of carnality. Of worldliness, spiritual immaturity. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and beginning in verse 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and beginning in verse 3. When we mature, we're supposed to be speaking as one. Paul says here, for you are still carnal. For where there are envy, strife, and divisions among you, are you not carnal and behaving like men? For when one says, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? We're following after worldly things, fleshly things. That's the opposite of where we should be spiritually. We're doing what appeals to us, what pleases us, what makes us feel like we're right. But we're not trying to please God. Unfortunately, many who claim to follow Jesus are aiding in this division because we're not practicing unity. We're not working to understand the scriptures together. I mean, think about all the different churches claiming to follow Christ, but they're doing different things in ways that we cannot find scriptural authority for. And I was reading something this past week about baptism, and it was from a Church of Christ group, and the comments from people reading that, and they said, well, baptism's not necessary. These are people professing to be Christian. Baptism isn't necessary at all. There's nothing in the scriptures that say that. Well, I could point to probably 5 passages without even thinking that say, like Mark chapter 16, he that believes and is baptized shall be saved. How can you say that? Find one example that supports that baptism isn't necessary in the book of Acts with the conversions. We can't, but we're divided about that religiously. Dozens, if not hundreds, of people professing to be Christians are believing different things. We're not unified. And in doing that, when we start having these problems, what are we doing? Well, we're opening the door wide and we're giving non-believers all the reason and the ammunition that they need to mock the cause of Christ because of our actions. Well, you say this and this person says this and you practice this way and you're not religious, and many times we're not. We're hindering the cause of Christ because of our religious division and living in ways and conducting ourselves by lives that are inconsistent with the scriptures. So today we're going to look at the problems caused by religious division. And sadly, we looked at those first two passages already. It's nothing new. It existed in the days of the early church. When we look at the church at Corinth, they had a lot of problems with divisions and schisms and the old parties and the old groups and factions, and they were being kept up, and they were causing the congregation not to be united. And it's telling us that the discord and division was within that church. We looked at 1 Corinthians 1, and Paul is saying, I'm pleading with you to speak the same thing because Christ isn't divided. How could they speak the same thing if they each could understand and each were allowed to interpret scriptures by just their own meanings? Well, that's what I think it means, so that must be what it's right. No, that's not how we speak the same things. And in chapter 11 and verse 18, and this passage largely deals with what was going on as they were coming around the Lord's table for the Lord's Supper. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 18, he says, For first of all, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and I partly believe it. Well, as we read on about what was happening during their partaking in the Lord's Supper, there were great divisions among them. And they had turned it into a common meal, and they had turned it into a gluttonous festival, and they were just, it was chaos. And he says, every time that you come together, and every time that you eat, it's not the Lord's Supper. One reason was because they were doing it wrong, but they were not following the examples that had been given to them. And here one group is over here doing one thing, and one group's over here getting drunk, and you're just lost altogether as to the meaning of it, and you're not doing it right. And again, today there are churches of Christ that are debating the Lord's Supper right now and how to do it. And how to do it properly. And are we to do it in a meal fashion? And are we to do it every time we come together? And just all complicating what the scriptures say and dividing us. And if we get down to the root of it, who causes all this division? Well, it's evil and it's Satan. The same with us as a country, physically. There are those who benefit from us being divided. Satan is the number one benefactor. Because when we're divided and when we're fighting amongst ourselves, then that makes us weak. Just as we're weak as a country, we're divided over the basics of what defines a man and a woman. If we're fighting over that, then there's going to be groups that'll benefit from us being at war with each other. And we'll be ripe for the picking, for them to come in and take over. Well, from a spiritual standpoint, if we're fighting amongst ourselves, that gives Satan all the room that he needs to walk in and destroy us from within. But again, it's nothing new. Even back in the first century, the conduct of Diotrephes in 3 John, verses 9 and 10, he wanted all the attention for himself. And those that were worrying him that to where he wasn't going to get the power and the place of authority, he was putting them out of the church. How's that being united? 3 John verse 9, he says, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, did not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds, which he does, prating against us with malicious words, and not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. How does this align with what Paul was saying, that kind of a member, that kind of a Christian? How does that align with what Paul is saying to his letter to the Corinthians about being united and speaking the same thing? Are we worshiping Diotrephes, or were they worshiping Jesus? Or do we want to be the one getting all the attention? Do we want to be congratulated and looked at as the big shot? And that's what he was doing. And sadly, that's what many people proclaiming to be ministers are doing today. It's not about the message of the gospel, it's about them. And they want all those in the town to know who they are. And if you argue with them, well, you're going to just have to head on down the road, because that's not going to be tolerated. Well, that's the way this man was doing. Anybody that came or tried to do something different, or send a message, as he said, the Apostle John wrote to the church. This man wasn't going to have anything to do with that, was he? And anybody that wanted to, well, I'm going to put those out of the church. How is that being united together? And we probably know some people like that around town. They're involved with religion, but only to make themselves look and feel good. That's not the attitude that a true Christian should have at all. And we see the turmoil caused by this in the parable of the tares. In Matthew chapter 13 and beginning in verse 24. Matthew chapter 13 and beginning in verse 24. Another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came in and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, an enemy has done this. The servants said to him, do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at that time of harvest I will say to the reapers, first gather the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. And then beginning in verse 36, he explains this parable. Then Jesus sent the multitudes away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said to them, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. So the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. And we can see this throughout history, not only in the first century, but beyond, as we look at the divisions that have happened within the church itself, and all the various groups that have formed and sprouted off, practicing their own doctrine and causing this division. think about the Roman and the Orthodox churches as they all divide. They all go back, if you trace their roots, they all sprouted off of Christianity, but are they truly Christians? Countless numbers have just came off of Christ and have divided him because they want to believe and practice something different. And these divisions continue. And I found as I was studying some quotes from names that we may recognize, and many of these names have large religious organizations named in their honor. But look at what some of them had to say. And I don't know how well you can read it. If you want to read it really clearly, get online and look at the YouTube channel because it should be playing on there. But in Martin Luther said, "I ask that men make no reference to my name and call themselves not Lutherans, but Christians." What is a Luther? My doctrine, I am sure, is not mine, nor have I been crucified for anyone. St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 3 would not allow Christians to call themselves Pauline or Peterine, but Christians. How then should I, poor foul carcass that I am, come to have men give to the children of Christ a name derived from my worthless name? No, no, my dear friends, let us abolish all party names and call ourselves Christians after him whose doctrine we have now. We can look around and we don't have to drive very far until we see a Lutheran church. They have been divided from that. Another one that I found, would to God that all these party names and unscriptural phrases and forms which have divided the Christian world were forgot, and that the very name Methodist might never be mentioned more, but be buried in eternal oblivion. Now, John Wesley is credited as the co-founder of the Methodist Church and also of the Wesleyan Church. Two names after him that he came up. Again, divisions from Christianity. I look forward with pleasure to the day when there will not be a Baptist living. I hope the Baptist name will soon perish, but let Christ's name last forever. That's from Charles Spurgeon, a Baptist preacher. Again, division that we find in this present world that has broken off of Christianity and demonstrated by literally thousands of denominations. And they'll look back at John 15, where I am the vine and you are the branches. Well, those branches are individuals. It's not congregations. It's not different religions. It's singular. It's a man. But again, division even among the Church of Christ goes back to the beginning and continues today. And sadly, when those who make pleas for unity, we become the divisive ones. And we're the ones that are causing problems when we're wanting to be united. There's over 20 identifiable divisions in the Church of Christ in the last 150 years. How can we be divided if we're all following the New Testament? And there's countless divisions among individual congregations. Our congregation itself split. Went mainly because of size, but one on the east side and one on the west side of town. Look at what the one on the east side of town has become. Is it a Church of Christ today? Is it a true Church of Christ today? Are we united with them? It would be near impossible. So the problem with division is ongoing. So what are some of the solutions for division? This will be the first, I think the point we will end with, but how do we fight division? Well, we accept the same authority. Who do we look to first? Well, we look to Jesus. There's a need for, and again, well, of course, we're arguing everything right now in this world, but we need a standard of authority to look to in this world, don't we? For anything from a physical standpoint. It's something as simple as a standard for measurement. Maybe our tape measure. Or how about a clock? Are we going to look at a clock and argue over what time it is? Well, if it's not set properly, we might. But let's just say that we have a clock that's set that we don't adjust. Are we going to look at that and say, well, that one's wrong? Mine shows a different time. Or as we watch the seconds click by on a clock, are we going to say, that's wrong? That's not a full second. Or that's more than a second. Or a tape measure. If I say, cut me a piece of wood that's 6.5 inches long and someone cuts it 9 inches long, well, that's close enough. Close enough for government work. We don't have to worry about that. No, because we'd have the same authority, wouldn't we? And we'd say, no, you go back and remeasure that. Well, for Christians, the standard of our spirituality begins with Christ through God's Word, as revealed by Jesus and his apostles. Matthew chapter 28 and verse 18. If all has been given to him, what else does that leave? Matthew 28 and 18. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. If all authority has been given to him, then what authority does that leave for me? What authority do I have to make changes or new doctrine or adjustments or revisions? What authority do I have or anyone has? I want to change this. I know what the scriptures say. I know that if I read them enough with an open mind, I'm going to see that baptism is a requirement for salvation, but I don't think it's necessary. So that's what we're going to start teaching. I'm taking that authority that has been given to Jesus, haven't I? And I also have to abide in that doctrine. I recognize that he is the source of all authority, and the doctrine that he has presented, then that's what I must stay in. John chapter 8 and verse 31. Continue in my words. Continue to obey his commandments and continue to receive the doctrine that he laid out. John 8 and verse 31, then Jesus said to those Jews who believed in him, if you abide in my words, you are my disciples indeed. That tells us a few things. We have to continue in them. It's not enough just to receive God's truth. We must remain in them and walk in them. But it also tells us that if we're not in his words, and we're not maintaining them and not keeping in them and abiding in them, then we're not his disciples. If we're going to be a genuine disciple of Christ, what's going to mark us as that is staying inside of his word, abiding in them. And we know that means we can't go beyond them. 2 John verse 9. The one who goes over or passes beyond or exceeds the limits does not abide in his doctrine. 2 John 9, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. When we remain within these holy limits that are set before us, we are within him. We are part of him. We have that relationship with him. But when we indulge in excess, or actions or passions or beliefs that go beyond that limitation that is set before us within the scriptures, then we do not have God. We do not have his heart, his love. We're serving ourselves instead of him. Whenever I think of transgressing or going beyond, I cannot think about that very long without thinking of our dog Daisy that we used to have. And Daisy was the sweetest dog in the world. She was also the most stubborn dog in the world. And she would not stay in our yard. There was no containing her in that. And almost on a daily basis, she would go beyond our fence because she would jump it. She knew she wasn't supposed to be out of our yard. Because if I caught her in the front yard, all I had to do was open it. I didn't even have to say anything to her. When she heard the front door open, she would go running as fast as she could back to the backyard. She had went beyond our fence. She was no longer abiding in our backyard. Well, when we go beyond God's word, We are no longer abiding within it. But we know that Jesus couldn't tell he couldn't tell everything while he was here on this earth. And many people will look at some of his teachings and say, well, Jesus didn't talk about that. He may not have. But he says in John chapter 16 that there's going to be one that's going to lead the apostles into all the truth. The things that you couldn't handle while I was alive on the earth, someone else is going to finish that job. I have all authority to do that. As Jesus, he has all the authority to make that happen. John 16 and verse 12, beginning, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. However, when he, the Spirit of truth, has come, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak of his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will tell you things to come. The Spirit was going to guide the apostles into all truth that was remaining, into all things pertaining to the Christian life. And if they were given all things, like the authority of Jesus, he said, I have all authority. How much then is going to be left? How many changes and additions are we going to have to make to the scriptures to have all authority, to have all the truth? No, we shouldn't have to add anything to it, should we? We're told that we're going to have everything that we need and there's going to be no new revelation after this part. We have it all. And that's why Paul kept preaching. And he said, I didn't keep anything back from you. He never shunned, Acts chapter 20 and verse 27, to declare everything to them. For I have not shunned to declare to you the whole counsel of God, Acts chapter 20 and verse 27. If he didn't teach everything to them, what did he leave back? He didn't keep anything from them. We're not going to have a need for a new revelation. We're not going to have a need for a new teaching, a new doctrine, because we already have it all. That's where we're going to end this morning and pick up with the rest of this on religious division this evening and talk more about what we can do for authority, how we can prevent it, and how we can be united. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, take this time and think about the condition of your soul. And if we need to make changes in our life, let's do that now while we have an opportunity. We see every single day, we can see examples of how frail life is and how evil that the world is. And we don't know when the Lord's going to return, but we know that we need to be prepared for it. So if there's something that we need to change in our life and correct it and make ourselves right with God, let's do that now while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing. God.